she agreed to the DNA test. Not because they had the right to ask, but because her child wasn't going to spend his life under a question that was never his. Mary Beth Holloway was 24 years old, a luxury brand consultant, a Black woman who had spent her life walking into rooms where someone expected someone else, and choosing not to flinch. She was also the wife of Kang Seo-jun, known in the underworld as the Black Seal, a Korean Mafia boss with a serpent tattoo coiled up his neck and a name that made men in dangerous rooms lower their voices. Seo-jun had chosen her. He had chosen her fully, in front of his family, in front of his world, and for 2 years that had been enough. Then she got pregnant, and the family that had tolerated her in silence for 2 years stopped tolerating her. Seo-jun had been told 9 years ago that he could not father children. The family knew this, so when Mary Beth showed him the positive test, when they saw him cry for the first time in his adult life, they did not see a miracle. They saw a problem. They called for a DNA test. In front of everyone. In the penthouse that Mary Beth had made her home, she could have fought it. She could have refused. Instead, she looked at Seo-jun's mother across the living room and said, "Do it, because I will not let this child spend his life under a question mark." What happened next in that master bedroom, with the whole family assembled in 2 envelopes on the table, nobody in that room was prepared for. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. Mary Beth was on the phone with a client in Seoul. When the nausea hit for the 3rd time that morning, she put the call on hold, pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth, and waited. Through the floor-to-soiling windows behind her desk, Manhattan sat in its December gray, 40 stories down, entirely indifferent. She took the call back. She finished the negotiation. She quoted the right numbers, closed at the right price, thanked the client in the right tone. When the call ended, she remained at her desk for a moment, staring at the dead screen. Already knowing what the feeling meant, there was a test in the bathroom cabinet. She had bought it 3 days ago and left it in the box without opening it. She did not rush. She washed her hands first. She read the instructions she did not need to read. She waited the required 2 minutes sitting on the edge of the marble basin, with her feet flat on the floor and her hands loose in her lap. The result came at 2 minutes and 12 seconds. She looked at it for a long time, set it down on the counter, looked at herself in the mirror. She did not smile. Not yet. She had learned early, inside this marriage, inside this family, not to open joy before she understood the room. She had been 22 when she met Kang Seo-jun, a referral introduction, at a rooftop client dinner. She should have left at 9. She stayed until midnight. He said almost nothing all evening. He watched her from across the table with a quality of attention that felt less like attraction and more like recognition. Like he was solving something he had been working on for a long time. She left before he asked for her number. He found it anyway. She was 23 when he asked her to marry him. She said yes, knowing what she was saying yes to, and knowing exactly what his family would say when they heard. His family had been civil. That was the precise word. Not warm. Civil. The kind that meant, "We are choosing not to say the thing we actually think." Madame Kang shook her hand at the engagement dinner with both palms pressed together, formal and correct, and looked at her with eyes that held a calculation. Mary Beth had seen her entire life. She had seen it in offices, in boardrooms, at client tables, in the faces of people who looked at her and saw an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be known. She had spent her career walking into those rooms. She was not going to stop. Seo Jun knew he never pretended his family was something other than what they were. He told her once, early on, that his parents were running the same operation they ran on every moving piece inside their world. Containment. They were waiting for her to become a problem they could quietly resolve. They think if they're patient, you'll be gone, he said. He said it the way he said everything. Flat and direct, with the stillness of a man who chose every word at cost. They're wrong. She had believed him. She still believed him. She believed it the way you believe a floor you have tested every day for 2 years and found solid. She picked up the test from the counter, walked back into the kitchen, and sat at the island. She set the test down in front of her. She had been pregnant for 3 minutes and she was already mapping the terrain. Seo Jun came home at 6:15. She heard the elevator before the door. She heard him the way she always heard him. The specific of his footsteps, unhurried but certain. The sound of a man who had never in his life needed to enter a room quietly. He came through the door, set his phone on the counter, looked at her, and stopped. Something in her face. He walked over slowly. Hey. She picked up the test and held it up without saying anything. He looked at it. He looked at her. Back at the test. He was not moving. Then the stillness fractured. Not loudly, not dramatically, but from the inside, the way structural things fail. His eyes filled. He had told her about the diagnosis. 9 years ago, a specialist, a set of results that had reached into him and destroyed something quietly and permanently. Extreme difficulty. For all practical purposes, unlikely. He had folded it the way men like him folded every wound. Downward. Inward, out of anyone's reach. He never complained about it. He never brought it to her as a grievance. He simply carried it as fact, the way he carried every fact that could not be changed. Now he was looking at the test, and his hands were at his sides, and he was not speaking. She kept watching his face. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, took her face in both hands, and said, in a voice she had never heard from him, low and fractured, "You're serious?" "Yes," he said her name, just her name. Mary Beth. The way you say something you thought you'd lost. Then he pulled her in and held her with both arms, and she felt his whole body exhale. A release so complete. It shook him slightly. He kissed her hair, her temple, her forehead. Then he pulled back, looked at her for 1 second, crouched down in front of her right there on the kitchen tile, and pressed his lips gently to her stomach, through the silk of her dress. She put her hand in his hair. He laughed. A real laugh. Not the measured sound he produced in front of the world. Something alive. Something she recognized as the man he was when no one else was there. He stood, picked up his phone. "I want to call them. I want them to know tonight." She watched him dial his parents' number, already smiling at something on the other end of the line, before it had even connected, and she said nothing. She let him have it. Because she loved him, and because she already knew, had known since the moment she looked at the test, that what was coming was going to require everything she had. Hae-suk and Dong-Yun Kang arrived at 8. Mary Beth opened the door in her emerald dress and her gold hoops and smiled, and the smile was not returned. She stepped aside. She took their coats. She brought them into the living room, where Seo Jun was already standing. Already lit up, in a way his parents had rarely seen, and clearly did not know how to receive. He told them directly. He was going to be a father. Mary Beth was pregnant. He wanted them to know tonight, because this was the kind of news that deserved to be given in person. There was a silence in the room that Mary Beth felt against her skin. Hae-suk went pale. Not in the way of surprise, but in the way of someone calculating damage. Dong-hyun's face went hard and flat. The expression of a man who has just heard a problem presented to him as good news. Neither of them moved to embrace their son. Neither of them looked at Mary Beth in the way you look at a woman who is carrying your grandchild. Seo-jun noticed the silence. He marked it. He assumed what he always assumed about his family's reactions to Mary Beth. That their resistance was about her, about race, about the image of the woman he had chosen. He did not yet understand that the fear in the room ran deeper than that. Hae-suk spoke first. This doesn't make sense. Seo-jun frowned. My wife is pregnant? His father's voice came out flat. Then someone needs to explain to us how that happened. The words landed like something dropped from a height. Mary Beth did not move. She felt the accusation settle on her, the way a cold hand settles on a shoulder. The pressure of it exact and deliberate. They were not confused. They were not shocked. They were accusing her. She had walked into enough rooms in her life to know the difference between doubt and indictment. Seo-jun's jaw went hard. You're going to want to be careful right now. His mother looked at him, then at Mary Beth, then back at Seo-jun, with the calm of a woman who had spent decades making decisions inside a world where consequences could be managed. A DNA test, she said. Before we discuss anything further. The silence after that was a different kind of silence. Seo-jun moved to speak. Mary Beth put her hand on his arm. He looked at her. She did not look back at him. She was looking at his mother. All right, Mary Beth said. The word went through the room like something unexpected. Seo-jun turned to her. You don't have to. I know. She held his gaze. But I'm going to. Because I will not let anyone in this room look at our child like he was born under suspicion. She said it quietly, without heat, in the tone of a woman stating a fact that is not negotiable. Schedule it. I'll be there. She watched Hae-suk's composure flicker, a millisecond, a recalibration, before it sealed back up. She watched Dong-hyun look at his son. She watched Seo-jun look at her, with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something between fury and something that had no name. Something closer to awe. The Kangs left shortly after. The apartment was quiet. Seo-jun stood at the window with his back to her and his hands in his pockets, and Mary Beth watched him from the kitchen doorway, giving him the space that kind of anger needed. He turned eventually. They had no right. No, she agreed. I almost threw them out. I know. He looked at her for a long moment. You didn't have to agree to it. Yes, I did. She came to stand beside him at the window, not for them, for him. She pressed her hand to her stomach. He's going to come into this world without a question attached to his name. Seo-jun did not sleep that night. He lay on his back beside Mary Beth, who fell asleep eventually, despite everything. Because Mary Beth had the particular discipline of a woman who had decided years ago not to let other people's cruelty take things from her that she needed. And he stared at the ceiling and turned something over in his mind that would not stop. His parents had not been surprised. They had been afraid. That was the thing. In 33 years, Seo-jun had learned to read a room with the precision of someone whose professional survival depended on distinguishing between the two. Surprise looked a specific way. Fear looked a different way. His mother's face, when he announced the pregnancy, had not been the face of a woman who was surprised and resentful. It had been the face of a woman who was afraid of what the pregnancy proved. He had been told 9 years ago, by a specialist named Dr. Kwon Jae-il, that fathering a child was, for all practical purposes, not something he should expect. He had taken that as a fact about himself. He had never revisited it. He had no reason to. At 3 a.m., he picked up his phone and sent 2 messages. One to the man he trusted with research that could not be traced. One to his own private physician. He wanted the original lab data from 9 years ago. Not the summary, not the results sheet, the underlying files. Samples, processing records, the physician's signature chain, the facility documentation. He wanted to understand one thing. If the diagnosis had been as definitive as it was presented, why had his parents reacted to a positive pregnancy test, as though the floor had just opened under them? He put the phone down. He looked at the ceiling for another hour. In the morning, he made Mary Beth coffee the way she liked it and said nothing about what he had sent. The test was submitted on a Tuesday. The results were expected within the week. Nobody talked about what would happen after. What happened instead was an occupation, not announced, not declared, but Hae-suk began sending family. Distant aunts materialized for unscheduled visits, to bring food, they said, to check in on Seo-jun, they said. And they would sit in the penthouse living room with tea they had not touched and look at Mary Beth the way you look at something you are trying to understand before deciding what to do with it. A cousin came twice. The family attorney appeared once for a meeting with Seo-jun that lasted 20 minutes and left a signs in the apartment that lasted longer. Mary Beth watched it happen. She understood what was. It was a circle being drawn around her. The family was closing ranks, not against a threat from outside, against her, inside. She had lived in this marriage for 2 years, knowing she existed at the edge of the Kang world's tolerance. This was what tolerance looked like when it ran out. She kept working. She took her calls. She negotiated her contracts. She wore her dresses and her gold earrings, and she moved through the penthouse as though she had not noticed the temperature change. That was the discipline. Not performing happiness. Performing normalcy, which is a different and harder thing. She ate properly. She slept when she could. She showed up at her desk every morning. It was on Thursday, the 4th day of waiting, that Seo-jun's aunt Yeonjin came for the 2nd time. She was a small woman who wore her authority in the set of her mouth. She sat at the kitchen island with a cup of tea and complimented the view, and said nothing that mattered for 20 minutes. Then she made a comment about how surprising it was, the timing of everything, how these things sometimes worked out unexpectedly. She said it in the general direction of the room, not quite looking at Mary Beth, which was the specific cowardice of a woman who wanted to land the insult without owning the throw. Mary Beth looked at her. She did not look away. She did not adjust her face. Yes, Mary Beth said, surprising. The aunt looked at her tea. Mary Beth excused herself shortly after and did not come back until the woman was gone. That night was the hardest one. Not because anything new happened. Nothing happened. That was the nature of the worst nights inside. Something like this. Nothing new and nothing resolved. And the weight of it sitting on everything anyway. She was in the master bathroom, the marble one, the room where she had stood 5 days ago with a test in her hand, and something enormous beginning. She sat on the edge of the bath, not crying. She was past crying, or before it, she could not tell which. Just sitting, in the quiet, with both hands flat against her stomach. The baby was not visible yet. There was no movement, no evidence. It was still entirely theoretical to everything around her, but it was not theoretical to her. It was the most real thing in her life, more real than the test results she was waiting for, more real than the family assembled outside this door. Like a judgment she had not been summoned to deliver a verdict on. More real than the sound of her own breath in the marble room. She thought about what Seo Jun had said to her once, early in the relationship, before any of this. She had asked him what it was like to move through a world where people were afraid of you. He had thought about it for a moment, genuinely thought, not performed. Then he said, "It's lonely. Being afraid of someone is not the same as knowing them." She had understood that. She had felt it from the other direction her entire life. Not being feared, but being reduced. Being the surface of a thing, not the interior. Being the visible fact of herself. Black, beautiful, present in a room where someone expected otherwise. And having that be the entirety of what other people bothered to see. She put her hands flat on the marble edge of the bath and looked at the wall. She had two choices. She could continue to wait for the test results, for Seo Jun's silence to break, for the family's pressure to exhaust itself, or she could act, not reactively, not from hurt, but deliberately, from the part of herself that had never let a closed room stay closed. She picked up her phone. She wrote a message to Seo Jun. 4 words. "I need to talk." Then she set the phone down and waited for him to come. He was there in under 3 minutes. He came through the bathroom door and sat on the floor in front of her without asking any questions his up against. His back against cross the serpent tattoo, dark against his neck, in the low light. He did not ask what was wrong. He already knew. "Whatever they find," she said, "or don't find, this doesn't end with us standing still. We move forward. We don't wait for their verdict to decide what our life is." He looked up at her. He nodded once. "And if that means leaving this building, this family structure, all of it, then we do that." He reached up and took her hand. He held it. "Agreed," he said. She believed him, and she meant every word of it. But she also knew that something was shifting in Seo Jun. Something behind his eyes that was not only about the pregnancy, not only about his family's cruelty, something he had not said yet. She did not push. She had learned when to be patient. She waited for him, the way she waited for everything she needed. Without apology and without retreat. The DNA results arrived Friday afternoon. Seo Jun did not open them. He called his parents, the aunts, the cousin, the family attorney, and told them to be at the penthouse at 7. No explanation, just the time. Mary Beth changed into her cream bodycon dress, gold hoops, gold chain, bangles on her wrist. She let her hair fall loose, smooth, and black against the cream fabric, and looked at herself in the mirror for one moment before walking out. The family was assembled in the master suite by 7:15. Hae Suk and Dong Hyun on the long settee, 2 aunts in chairs, the cousin and attorney standing near the window. Mary Beth sat on the edge of the bed. Seo Jun stood at the foot of it with the sealed envelope in his hand. He had chosen this room deliberately. The most private space in the penthouse, the room that belonged to him and Mary Beth, the room he was about to fill with the exact people who had made it a siege. He opened the envelope, read in silence, then looked up. "The child is mine." Mary Beth closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Hae-suk drew breath. "Good, then we can." Seo-jun raised one hand. She stopped. He set the envelope on the nightstand and reached into the bedside drawer. He placed a second folder on the mattress between himself and his parents. Manila. Thick. He did not open it immediately. "I want to tell you what's inside before you see it," he said. "I want you to know that I have every piece, every name, every transaction." Dawn's left hand began its tremor. 9 years ago, Seo-jun said, "I was told by a specialist that I could not father children. I believed it. I grieved it the way you taught me to grieve, privately, without naming it. I treated it as fact." He paused. It was not a fact. It was a purchase. He opened the folder. Inside, original lab data from 9 years prior, alongside an unaltered second set of results. A bank transfer record with date and amount, the recipient's name, and a signed witnessed affidavit from Dr. Kwon Jae-il, the retired reproductive endocrinologist, detailing the payment the Kang family had made to convince their son he was sterile, to keep him emotionally fractured and controllable within the family structure. The room did not make a sound. Hae-suk's composure went, a small sound, the particular sound of something giving way that has been held rigid too long. Dong-hyun's hand was shaking visibly. An aunt turned away. The attorney looked at the floor. Seo-jun let it sit. Then, you decided that a son who believed he was broken was more useful to you than a son with an actual life, with a family of his own, with a reason to build something outside your reach. He looked at his mother. You paid a physician to steal that from me, and when my wife brought that life back, when she showed up with proof that the story you sold me was a lie, your first move was to accuse her. Hae-suk tried. We were protecting Kneal. One word, not raised, not repeated, nobody moved. He looked at his mother, then his father, then the room, each face taking his time. You humiliated my wife in her own home. You made her accept a test she had no reason to accept. You filled this apartment with your judgment for a week. He stopped. You will kneel before her, all of you. Hae-suk went first. Slowly, the particular difficulty of a woman for whom this posture had no precedent. Then Dong-hyun, his heavy frame lowering with effort, his face the face of a man watching his own authority dissolve. The aunts followed, the cousin, then the attorney, who set his briefcase aside quietly and went down with the careful movement of someone recording this moment as a debt he would carry. Every one of them on the floor of the master suite, in front of Mary Beth. Hae-suk looked up. Her face had nothing left to protect. Forgive me. Mary Beth looked at her for a long, unblinking moment. I may forgive you one day, she said, but I will never forget that you tried to make my child a shame before he was born. Silence. Seo-jun spoke one final time. We're leaving. We won't be coming back. The financial structure stays intact. Arrangements through the attorney. He looked at his parents. Don't contact us unless we invite it. He held out his hand. Mary Beth took it. She stood from the edge of the bed and walked beside him through the suite, through the penthouse, into the lobby, where their bags had already been arranged. At the building entrance, Seo-jun stopped. He turned to her. Then he knelt. Not in the language of command, not in punishment, but in something older and quieter than either. He pressed both hands to her stomach and said, You two are the only family I kneel for. Mary Beth touched his face. He rose. He took her hand. They walked through the lobby doors into the December street. Mary Beth, in her cream dress, gold earrings, catching the last of the day's light. Her black hair loose and long against her shoulders, her stride unhurried. Not the woman they had accused, not the woman who had waited. The wife, the mother, the one they had tried to unmake and failed. Upstairs, the Kang family was still on its knees. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever had to prove something that was never in question? Simply because someone else needed to believe you were wrong? Have you ever watched the people who accused you be forced to face what they did? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all, and if you believe in stories about dignity, truth, and justice, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel